Okay, so I wanted to do my March, April reads. So these are, it's actually three I'm doing. Oh, sorry, girl. Hey, girl, how you doing? I just wanted to come on and talk about these books that I read for March and April. It's three, but one of them I did as an audiobook. So the first one I'm gonna talk about is Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, and I'll put the cover somewhere over here. So Year of Yes is essentially about Shonda's challenge to herself to have a year of saying yes to the things that she would usually say no to. And I should have wrote this down. This is also kind of stream of consciousness because like I've been trying to talk about these books for so long, but that's essentially what Year of Yes is. And it's a basically a collection of stories and highlights from the year that Shonda talks about. And I really did enjoy the book. I really loved listening to it in an audio version because she was also the person who did the audio, Shonda herself. So so that was really cool. I feel like some of my major takeaways from that book was really, I mean, the major takeaway, I mean, it's pretty a pretty self-explanatory book, but I feel like the major takeaway is really just going out there into the unknown and challenging yourself to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. But she does have really like special things about being true to yourself, about being and surrounding yourself with the right people along that journey who will challenge you, but also who genuinely care about your progress or invested in your progress, you know, just not for any selfish reason, but just genuinely want to see you succeed. So that was really cool. It was also cool just to like learn more about Shonda. I mean, she really is. I didn't know that she has like three daughters that she adopted, and she talks about her relationships. Has like she never wants to get married, and she also talks about this thing in the book about being the first only something, like this thing about being women in the entertainment industry, and especially being a black woman in the entertainment industry. So yeah, I really don't have too much to say about that book, to be honest. There was also a chapter about the weight loss thing, and she was talking about how the weight she had was she was not consciously using it, but could sometimes be subconsciously using it as a defense mechanism, and all other different stuff. So anyways, yeah, Year of Yes is something that I read or finished reading in March, I think. It was a feel good book. It wasn't really too long. Like, I really liked it. I would definitely recommend it. So yeah, that's pretty much Year of Yes. I didn't have too much to say about that one. This one, however, this is, oh, my nails are on it. Can you see? Yeah, so this is Pleasure Activism: The Politics of Feeling Good, written and gathered by Adrienne Maree Brown. I hope I said her middle name right. This was definitely a favorite of mine. I love this book so much. And so this would just say like the first thing that I really, really loved about this book. I really enjoyed how personal it was. Like, it's and like she said, it's a gathered. It's a collection of different essays, conversations, like excerpts from it. It is just such a deeply personal book, and it's been so cool to like. It was so cool to read about all these different black and brown people making pleasure accessible in their life, and talking about how they ritualize joy and pleasure. And people shared so many stories, I mean, about sex, trauma, dying and death, relationships, their bodies, love, friendship. It was just very like radically honest and vulnerable in a way. And also I really love that she introduced me to a lot of historical figures that I had not really come into contact with their work before. So people like Audre Lorde, Octavia Butler, Patricia Hill Collins. Like there were so many different writers that I had not really known before, or I had known of but like never been in contact with their works like intimately. So those are the top two things, well not top two, but those are my first things that I really really enjoyed about this book, is just how it feels so like beautiful to like in one space have like all these stories from people that you've never met but are just doing these super cool things. And it's almost like it's definitely inspiring in so many ways to like see how people are really making pleasure. And even, you know, her conversation about how do you find pleasure in activism, and because activism, you know, traditionally can be seen as such a like emotionally taxing work. And even though it is, it's even the conversation she's had about people who are in that space still finding pleasure and time to laugh and to have joy and happiness even in all that. Like I just thought that was so cool because it really reframes the way the way I thought about pleasure in terms of like activism. But even when she talks about pleasure in terms of death, like how death and dying can be seen as such a tumultuous experience, but how even in that people can find pleasure and happiness and joy. And so I really really did like that part of the book. And she even talks about people cultivating their pleasures in performance art, in identity, in movement. And so like this essentially, the book is really about cultivating your pleasure, cultivating your own good feeling, and ritualizing your joy, which I just feel like as Black people, man, like that's just so important. Like especially living in this country and with our history, it's just so important to make joy accessible to Black people and to make people feel like their life isn't only about suffering and pain. And like, so I just really enjoyed that part of the book. Some other things that I really loved about this book. So this book is titillating. I hope I said that right. Because, you know, it like clearly has like pictures of animals doing things. But she does a really good job of, and she uses Audre Lorde's framework of talking about the erotic as power, and how a sensual life is more than just sexuality. And I think that's for me that was such a cool thing to think about. What is it to live a sensual life? And you know, your mind can immediately just go into just like sex. But living a sensual life is really being in tune with your feeling, your emotions, being in tune with your breath, your movement. It's having a heightened sense of awareness about your life and all and everything, and just having a full presence in what's happening in your life. And so I really love that. Another major point for me was she talks a lot about reframing desires to be more life affirming, rooted in dignity and an acknowledgement of self. And so definitely for me, being in my 20 somethings, this whole idea of reframing your desires is such an important highlight for me, because I think that, you know, my whole life my mom has always talked about, you know, just because you want something doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you. And so her whole idea of reframing your desires is basically about reframing what you want to be good for you. So it's like, stop wanting things that are not good for you. Stop wanting things that are not life affirming to you. Like those things should not be things that you desire anymore. And so I just thought that was such a, I don't know, like that whole idea of, I think that theme of reframing, of reimagining, of setting new codes for yourself is something that I really enjoy from a lot of the books that I've read over quarantine, of just people just saying that you can, like, and that everything that you believe is the status quo, or everything that you believe is just how it is not. Things are what you want them to be, and things can be what you want them to be. So I really love that. She also talks about healing towards pleasure, which is another concept that I really loved. And that's another thing that I really enjoyed about this whole conversation of healing. Throughout the books that I've read over quarantine, and how in her book, like, healing can be a pleasurable act. And you know, even in what's Bell Hooks' book about healing in community, and healing in communion. I just thought those are really good themes that I really enjoyed. And then she talks about pleasure as practice. Work your pleasure muscles. So I think that's another thing that I really enjoyed about how, you know, once you read this book, it's one of those things where you don't just put down. Like, you really have to work at your pleasure muscles. You have to work at making pleasure accessible to you, and obtaining that level throughout your day-to-day life, because, you know, obviously life can quickly tell you that it should not be pleasurable. So I think that her whole idea about working your pleasure muscles I really liked. And like I said before, designing your own good feeling. So about cultivating pleasure in your life, cultivating a space that is pleasurable for you, a life that is pleasurable for you. Really love that. And and then the last thing was just this thing about accessibility. Like, and I think that conversation about accessibility is so important, about how you make joy and pleasure accessible and good feeling accessible for Black and brown people. And, you know, that's on a macro sense, but just even in your own life on a micro level, how do you make joy and pleasure accessible in your own life? And so, I don't know, like, that was a really cool thing to me. I also loved how, like, let me see, how in the book she gives you homework. So I you know what, we love homework, but she gives you homework at some of the ends of the chapters, which I just thought which I love when books have this, like, personal touch to it, and this book was just so personal. Like, I just love feeling like when people were talking, like, I was talking to them myself. And I love when authors give you some type of interaction where you kind of get to know them. And so she gives this, like, hot and heavy homework at the end. And so I love that. And I really did enjoy this book. She was very thick. She's a thick one. But I really love this book. So there's that. So this is the there you go. So this is the other book that I read. This is The Mastery of Love, A Practical Guide to the Art of Relationships by Don Miguel Ruiz. And this is not a series, but it's more of a collection. So, like, this Mastery of Love book, I think there are two other books. So there's a Mastery of Awareness, Mastery of Transformation, and the Mastery of Love is the last one. So I'm saying that because I did not like this book. And I'm like, maybe it's because I just read the third book and did not read the other two, but I did not like this book. But from my book club meeting, I feel like it's just because I don't like how he writes. I tend not to like writers who are very blunt in their presentation. I don't like blunt people at all. Like, I just really don't. So his writing style is just very matter of fact, and it's very just to the point. It lacks personality to me. It lacks, like, empathy. It lacks understanding. It lacks nuance to me. So yeah, I like it. I did not like it. So I did not like this book. I don't know if I would recommend it, but I wouldn't not recommend. Like, if somebody was like, I really want to read the book, I'd be like, okay, cool, you should read it, because you might get something out of it. And like I said, I didn't like it, but I did get something out of it. So my major takeaways from this book. Okay, so I really did enjoy the last the last couple of chapters in the book, and specifically maybe the last one, where he talks about the God within you, and how he says, we are born with the right to be happy, with the right to enjoy life. So things like that I really enjoyed. And he talks about, when you hear your heart guiding you to your happiness, then make a choice and stick with it. And so he also talks about the God that you have within you. What else he says? I wrote down another quote that he has from the book. He talks about, we see God. There was one quote that I really, really liked. I'm trying to find it. Sorry. Okay, it was something about, like, we chase for God, but God is always, there it go. We are hunting for God, but God is already inside us. So I like that part of the book. I really did love his whole conversation about the war on control. And essentially he talks about how this romanticizing, the way we romanticize control really erodes our ability to love. And he talks about that in romantic relationships, but also in a broader context of just the world, of how we really try to control what people do, what they think, what they feel. And it really just overshadows our ability to really love people with our full selves. So I loved his whole conversation about the war of control. I really enjoyed that. Now, one standout thing that I really did love about this book, which honestly was in the first couple of chapters, was his whole conversation about the dream, and how essentially everything in this world is not real. And the dream, is whatever the dreamer makes it. And essentially, it's the age-old thing about whatever you think is what you see. And so he just really talks about this, and then like that part of the book I really did like, because it has so many implications about this world. Because like, even when you think about, because I have this really thing about money, that I'm like, bro, at the root of it, money is really nothing. Like, money is something that somebody made up. Like, it's a piece of paper, literally. And like, even when you think about in quarantine, like, you can just make more. Like, money essentially has no value until you give it value. Like, it's a piece of paper, and that's why people can make more of it. I mean, like, you make more of it, and then there's an influx, and then it has no value. So it's just like this whole idea of like scarcity and money, and like, it's just not real. Like, it's literally a concept that people made up. And his whole idea about the dream, and how nothing is honestly real, suffering is not real, like it is literally what the dreamer makes up. So yeah, I love that part. I did love that part of the book. Yeah, and then he also talks about things about healing the wounded mind. And like I said before, I love conversations about healing in all the books that I read. So any conversation about healing I really enjoy, and I'm prone to open up to. But yeah, I didn't really like the book for those reasons that I said before, but I wouldn't say don't read it. I personally just didn't like it, but I think it's just the writing style that I don't tend to like. So yeah, I think if the writing style is cool with people, then give it a try. But yeah, that's basically my March and April reads. I still don't know how to do thumbnails, but yeah. Anyways, girls, so I'll talk to you later.